Welcome to the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast.
Hi, I'm David Manti, and welcome to a new episode of the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast. With me today are Nick Recht and Scott Fabian with TechLinks. Thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you for having us.
A special episode in the studio. Really, I appreciate you guys making the trip.
Oh, not a problem at all. It's a short drive from our Milwaukee headquarters.
I mean, we gotta say it's really far away. Like they drove cross country to get here.
In fact, we walked.
They walked
Uphill both ways.
in the unseasonably mild winter weather in Wisconsin. Well, before we get started, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You could also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach me at david@cannabisequipmentnews.com with email the podcast in the subject line. You can also subscribe to our daily newsletter. Make sure you get it delivered to your inbox first. Nick, I'll start with you. Tell me a little bit about TechLinks and what you guys do.
All right. Well, TechLinks has been around for a little over 30 years. At our core, we make label design and label printing software. We work many different industries, but recently we've had a focus on the cannabis industry just because of how fast it's been growing, how fast the companies are growing, and how, there's a lot of changes and mergers and acquisitions and growth in manufacturing there. I've been with TechLinks for, it'll be 15 years in May. And I currently oversee sales, but I have a background in the support and product management side.
Do you got a background in cannabis at all?
Well, not that I regularly talk about on podcasts, but I did go to college. So
Understood.
Yeah.
Understood. And I definitely saw the, you hit the,
My little bit
oh yeah. It's the one thing with the industry is everything's a pun. It's all a pun.
What pun did I make?
Everything is growing.
Everything's growing.
Oh,
Yeah. Out to a great start.
Right on.
Gotta love the unintended pun. Scott, tell me about yourself.
I grew up in California. Los Angeles, California is where I grew up. So like the whole world around me was kind of leaning that way before the national and all the states and stuff legalizing. And then I went to school in Milwaukee to play volleyball, where I found Nick actually at a job fair on campus.
Oh, very cool.
Crazy enough. So that was 7 years ago, almost to the day. So this April will be my 7-year anniversary at TechLinks, doing primarily technical stuff. I started on the support side, supporting the software on the call queue, and then moving into more enterprise, larger scope, bunch of different use cases, industries. And then the last year or so, I've been focusing on development and the cannabis industry, and kind of been how do we get all this stuff to marry up with labels with all the different specifications and requirements by the different states.
Okay. Do you still play volleyball?
I still play volleyball.
So are you like in that rec league where all of a sudden your team shows up and they're just like, why do we even come?
I don't know. I can't speak for the other team. But I do play a lot in the VLA and just with a lot of my friends on the weekends.
Okay.
There's a hotbed in Milwaukee, surprisingly.
You can see it in their eyes. They're just like, we already got it. So does TechLinks make any machinery, or is it specifically the software behind the scenes?
Great question. And we are exclusively a software company. And I feel like I've had to say this a bazillion times in my career.
Yeah.
So we exclusively make software, design, printing, automation, integration. Some of the stuff we'll talk about is Scott's doing, where it's printing forms that acquire data from various business systems that specialize in the cannabis space. But if you're designing a label for fun, you're probably not too much fun to hang out with, right? So we have very strong partnerships with hardware manufacturers, ranging from the printers and the scanners to the business systems and print and apply machines that complement the design side of things.
Okay. Scott, what are some of the trends that you're seeing right now in terms of what cannabis operators are demanding when it comes to labeling?
It's a lot of, when we were at BizCon especially, it was a lot of, we're spending so much time on labels. And the answer usually is because the data that is required to be on there is not easily accessible. It's always in some cloud warehouse or a ERP system or something where we have to either manually type in all the stuff that's required by the state. The state requirements are expanding in scope for much more data. We have to download spreadsheets that are tough to manage. They're out of date immediately as soon as you download them.
Yeah.
So it's all about how do we get the data in the right spot and have as few clicks as possible.
Okay. So I take it that's what you guys do.
Yeah, that's been mostly my passion project the last year or so. We partnered with Confident Limbs, formerly Confident Cannabis, for test results, and we have printing forms that grab it live and put it on the labels for people. We just recently validated with Metric, and we're talking to a few others. Just all about getting the data, making it easier for printing and designing.
So these cannabis operators, when they're making labels, they're pulling that data to each individual label manually?
Right. So if you send in you're printing eighth labels or something, then you sent a package, you sent a sample to a lab to test it, and you get back your cannabinoids, your terpenes, all the stuff that goes into the testing.
Yeah.
And then that needs to be on the label in a very specific way, depending on the state. I was just working with a customer in Hawaii, and it was like a 5x5 table of all the different cannabinoids, their measurements, milligrams per serving, milligrams per package, milligrams for everything. So it was like a ton of stuff. And the way we set it up is just like point, click, select that package, and all that stuff populates, versus prior to that, he was having to type in like 20 different values individually.
In doing that individually, I feel like that is just a hotbed for errors that'll help you or force you out of compliance.
Exactly. Error prone, fines, all the stuff that you don't want.
How often are these like recalls or fines triggered by simple compliance failures? Is it like 90% of the time? Is that what's happening?
We see it a lot. I mean, it's not exclusive to cannabis either.
Yeah.
Labeling across any industry is if you don't know what's in the box unless you have the label on it. So if that label is wrong, customer's not getting the right stuff, ship it back. So it's kind of the important part is how do we get the data on there as simple as possible and as few error spots as you can.
So at what stage of the process are people coming to you? Are they already struggling with label issues? Is it a new operator that's just looking to do everything right out of the gates? Sort of where is your customer typically in terms of their roadmap, I guess?
Yeah, we've certainly seen every part of the process.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say the most common one we see are people who have beautiful artistic labels on their jars of nugs or their doob tubes, and they're over labeling it, meaning they're applying a additional like thermal transfer black and white label with test results on a label. And they approach us because they want the art and the test data to be printed simultaneously. So we're coming into the picture when they're going from potentially ordering pre-printed labels to wanting to print color in-house on demand.
Is the cannabis industry different than others like food and beverage when it comes to the sophistication of artwork combined with the volume of information that needs to be on the label? Or is it something that you typically see with like smaller niche brands?
I'd say it's very much the same. It's the people who are different.
Okay.
More established industries have like been manufacturing for a long time. So applying data on a label that might also be used for packaging, or simply leveraging barcode technology to automate shipping and receiving and whatnot, is more well accepted. In the cannabis space, you have a lot of people who started a business from a passion project and they're not bringing a lot of manufacturing best practices to the table until it becomes a problem that they see getting in the way of profitability or efficiency.
Is it easier to work with sort of the seasoned vets, or is it easier to kind of like work with the people that, for lack of a better term, don't know what they're doing just because they're a little bit easier to shape in terms of what works best?
You know, it's hard to say. I can tell you it's been a lot of fun in cannabis industry, just showing people what's possible. That's kind of the fun part, and the obligation I feel is like, hey, there's a better way to do this. And when I'm showing people like the Confident Limbs print form of, you just select a sample and then it populates on the label. The O factor is huge. And people are like, oh, like
yeah,
I can do it that way. Like that part is fun. So being able to kind of share long-standing, 30 years of our company, and then between us a bunch of years as well, being able to be like, these are the best practices we found, and then bring them to cannabis has been a lot of fun.
What kind of ROI are people looking at? I mean, just because if it is that time intensive beforehand, I have to imagine that it's a pretty quick turnaround.
Yeah, it's off the walls. We there's a few people that I've been talking to. We kind of open with how much time are you spending labeling? What's the process? They go, we have a guy who spends 8 hours a day just pulling down data, getting it ready, and then labeling stuff, and then showing them the same process in using our solutions is like, this guy can now spend 7.5 more hours doing other things for the business.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's really important, especially in an industry that, like many others, struggles to find good labor.
Right.
Is labeling an afterthought in cannabis?
It's an afterthought, I think, all the time.
Yeah.
We have, I run into it a bunch where, and even in my own personal experience, I wouldn't have never guessed in a million years I'd have a passion for labeling stuff. If you told me in college, your career is going to be labeling for the first little bit. So that is cool. And one of the partners I worked with, he called it the humble label of like, it's not really seen unless, you're scanning it or something, but it holds all the value of it. I already kind of said is what's in here, where's it going, who's it for? Where's it coming from? There's a breadcrumb that the label is kind of traversing the whole time.
Well, and it's pretty important too when it comes to like branding and marketing as well, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
What are some common mistakes that you see when it comes to labeling? I guess maybe the low-hanging fruit that people could kind of fix right away in their own labeling operations.
I know the lowest hanging fruit is manual entry of data.
Yeah.
So for example, if your test results are stored in a business system or a cloud source, Confident Limbs, if it's part of Metric, and you're printing that out or looking at it on one screen and keying in that information into your label, huge room for error. And you can get a pretty good return on your investment simply by looking to the single source of the truth to pull that data directly onto your label template.
And you said are you working on an API with Metric so that way it comes directly from there?
Yeah, exactly. Connectors within forms that we build that will go get the data and then push it into the labels that you've designed. Because in the scope of us too, the big thing that CodeSoft and all of our design products do is it's a lot easier to design than it has been in the past. Back in the early days, you'd be coding the language of the printer and printing it out and testing it and kind of going back and forth. The designers, our whole thing is drag and drop, and then whatever you put there, it's going to be there. What you see is what you get. So combining that with the correct data coming from the right place, it's kind of magic. It's awesome.
How far out is that integration with Metric?
It's done.
Oh, it's done.
It's done.
Oh, gotcha. Sorry, I thought you said you were working on it.
Yeah, no, yeah. Sorry, yeah, we're Metric validated, and same with Confident. We're good.
Oh, very good. Are your solutions or products scalable? So, I mean, is it easier for an MSO to work with TechLinks or a small mom and pop? Like, how does it work for cannabis operators of all shapes and sizes?
I'll pass that ball to Nick. You got a good spiel on this.
Yeah. So our solutions range the gambit for the mom and pop shop to the multinationals. There's more mom and pop shops in cannabis now than there are big players. Reason being, emerging market, it's hard to go over the border. So you have a lot of states motivating people to keep it within the state. And that's where we're seeing a lot of success in, we call them like the 1Z, 2Z deployments. A designer with a little printing form, maybe a small amount of integration work to access those lab results. We do business with some of the best example is out of Illinois. There's two really big, fully all three stages, the cultivation, the processing, and the retail.
Yeah, vertically integrated.
Yeah. We do a lot of business with two of the big names in Illinois. And what is really fascinating about that is just like many other industries, operations scale. You take what you were doing on your laptop and do it on another laptop and a third and a fourth. They were the first two we saw say there has to be a better way.
Yeah.
And of course there is, and we can play with that too. So it's not just design, right? That's necessary for every company. Where I'd say you really get a big bang for your buck is when we're talking about automating And automation on the labeling side is, it's like forgotten, right?
Yeah.
When you have a machine that's wrapping a label, or as a box comes down, it slaps it on it as it goes. It's physical. You can see it. You can touch it. People can see how much time it's going to save by not having somebody manually do it. On the labeling side, when they are typing something in and clicking print for a run of 100, yeah, there was 3 to 5 minutes of data entry and then quality control up front.
Yeah.
The initial spend is typically done on the physical automation. The second hand is, we ran a job of, 800 rolls.
Yeah.
And every one of them had the wrong test results. How do we make sure that doesn't happen again?
Yeah.
And that's where we really come into play with our more enterprise level solutions that'll integrate from your ERP system or your manufacturing engineering solution that's holding that data to pump it out.
So is it like sold per seat?
Depends on which solution.
Okay.
So if you're mom and pop shop and you're really just looking to achieve designing a label,
Yeah.
and getting access to, let's say, Confident Limbs for your test results.
Yeah.
It's a user license. Typically, we sell 1 or 2 because that's how many stations they have actually printing labels.
Okay.
When it comes to like integrated automation, it's more on the amount of printers you're printing to. You still need the 1 or 2 people to design the labels,
Yeah.
but then it's managing that throughput for how many printers you're printing to.
Okay. Talking about hardware, you said that you sort of have your favorites. What are some of your favorites? What are some of the manufacturers and packagers out there that are kind of stand above the rest?
Well, I need to preface it with, at TechLinks, we are completely printer agnostic.
Okay.
We support, a wide variety of pieces of hardware.
Yeah.
In the cannabis space, the most established names are winning right now. So if you're talking thermal transfer, black and white, we see a lot of Zebra, and they tend to be very easy to drive and very easy to integrate with.
Yeah.
As we see these companies grow, and they want to solve other problems, like they want the product package to have the live printing on it.
Yeah.
We see the popularity of Epson growing a lot because they do full color on demand, pretty high speed.
Like digital printing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What they have a special name for it. It's like some special ink that has
The ColorWorks
Yeah.
stuff? Yeah, the ColorWorks.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'd say on the printer side, those two are pretty big and grown in popularity, particularly in the cannabis space.
Are a lot of labels still applied by hand in cannabis?
Yeah,
So
I think
many.
so.
Yeah. I mean, have you guys seen like what is the hesitation when it comes to automating that part of the process?
I think it comes from 2 places. One is volume,
Yeah.
because we're handling it now.
Okay.
We can continue to do that, and then scope grows, and all of a sudden you're manually labeling 7,000 dube tubes that you have to get done by the end of the week.
Yeah.
And then the other is depending on the cost or the price that we've also. So I guess should say to finish that point is the barrier for entry of cost for the business to say we have to spend this amount of money. The ROI is unclear. We don't really know. And concern I've heard from other folks too is, well, I don't want to put this guy out of a job. And it's more of the reframing of that guy now can do so many different things and more things for the business. He's not tied up doing labeling.
Yeah. Is that still out there? Just because I feel like ever since the first robot came out in manufacturing, they're just like, oh, they're going to take our jobs. And it's like ever since then, it's been like, no, you can go do so many other things. Like, I mean, so that mindset's still out there, like automation's coming for our workers?
Here and there, I run into it. Yeah. And it's now we have another brain to put towards something a robot can't do.
Right. Are there the same concerns and restrictions as you see in labeling for like food and beverage, for example, like when it comes to, I don't know, label sterility or anything like that?
The biggest difference is how disparate it is across states. With the FDA, everyone's kind of on the same page,
Yeah.
with food and bev especially, or pharmaceutical. With cannabis, with all the states having different requirements, Department of Health or different things that are the governing body, it's hard to find a kind of a one size fits all, or this is what you need to do to make it work. It's always very flexible. And that is where the designer comes in really, really more as a powerful player when it comes to CodeSoft, because, hey, we can design the label however we need it to look.
Yeah.
And that's, you can own that design. You don't have to depend on anybody else. You have the power to suit that in the same day a new requirement comes out.
So a lot of operators are focusing on like GMP, good manufacturing practices, just to make sure they're kind of like as prepared as they possibly could be for further regulation, whether or not it's at a national level and whenever that might happen. Does labeling play a role in that in terms of being like a GMP manufacturer? Or, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I'd say it absolutely does.
Yeah.
So notoriously in manufacturing, you have, old school people talking about the price of a fingerprint, right? And, well, I do see a lot of, the robots are coming for our jobs. I'm seeing kind of the needle shift in the direction in the cannabis space. People saying, if we want to be scalable, we do need to embrace automation, not just on the physical side, but on the software integration side as well. Leveraging that single source of truth for the data and getting it onto the label and letting that bleed all the way sometimes to the retail side. We were literally on the phone this morning with a cannabis company trying to meet a new regulation in Arizona where they need a QR code on the label that not only goes to the test results, a second QR code which takes them to like a page with strain information and whatnot. Now that's a labeling problem, right? With a point of sale benefit.
Yeah.
We're seeing it a lot. And I'd say labeling is like the most forgotten part of an efficient manufacturing process.
Okay.
For years, we've seen palletizers putting boxes on pallets and then going to a different section where it'll get plastic wrap before it goes on the truck. Well, all of that is facilitated by a barcode label. And many times the last part of that process that's automated is the generation of the barcode label.
Yeah.
We do a lot of manual stuff to have that be automated.
What was that price of a fingerprint? What is that saying related to?
Oh, so the cost of a fingerprint.
Oh, okay.
If you have somebody putting pieces in a box and then closing a box and then putting the boxes in a bigger box, every fingerprint comes with a cost associated with it.
Okay.
Where when you replace it with, for example, a machine dropping the correct weight into a box, closing it, putting it into a different box and zipping down a line, eliminate fingerprints, ultimately save a lot of money.
Okay. One critical issue for cannabis operators is sustainability. So how can sustainability play a role when it comes to labeling, or are labels just the way they're always going to be and not getting any more sustainable?
Well, I think you got to think about reduction in waste.
Okay.
Anytime you're talking about sustainability, obviously. But when you have a time-consuming manual process that might be error-prone, if that label's already applied to a package, you might be talking about wasting not only the label, but the package in which that label went on.
Yeah.
I mean, in food, you often hear the story about how your pallet of lettuce got to the store, but it was labeled tomatoes, so they couldn't receive it. And the distributor doesn't even want it back.
Yeah.
They pay to throw everything away. And I can see some parallels in the cannabis space as well.
Okay.
If you have mislabeled product that's going to a processing facility and they process it all and it's the wrong strain, wrong test results, I can see a lot of waste there. And I know from MJ BizCon and some of the other grow facilities we've got to visit that there is an abundance of cannabis now where it is being treated more like a piece of romaine lettuce, than it is an actual product we used to pay $50 for a bag from somebody behind the dumpster.
Right. It is. It's always been the devil's lettuce.
Yeah.
So you had mentioned the differences in labeling state to state. When things go national, it's likely that they'll figure out the state that's doing it the best and just make everybody else do the same. So in your opinion, Scott, which state is doing labeling the best for cannabis?
Well, it kind of depends on what you see as the best. As far as we want the most amount of information. We want the easiest way for customer to see the breadcrumb from seed to sale.
Yeah. What do you see as the best?
So recently working in Illinois and Hawaii,
Yeah.
I think those guys are doing great. The Illinois it's a lot more concise than I found than the Hawaii label they needed it all physically on the label versus it's great for manufacturers, people producing product to say, hey, here's our big, nice, pretty branded label with a link to the important stuff. And then the nice part about having that link too is that can be updated with new information, a label that's printed on there.
Yeah.
If the information becomes outdated or we learn new things, that's now kind of an obsolete label. So being able to have give the customer access to information that is always up to date with a link or something smaller, it's easier on the manufacturers and the product producers as well as the customer.
Do you have any information from clients on how many people actually use those QR codes?
No, I don't.
Yeah, it's I know that I've scanned them. Either directly at a dispensary or at my house if I'm trying to, learn more information about it.
Yeah.
And I honestly can't tell you if I did it because I know that we might have played a role in generating it or if I cared for the information.
Okay. Just because I feel like, when QR codes first came out, they were the next best thing. And then they kind of went away for a little bit. Yeah. And now it seems like they're everywhere again. And I was just kind of curious, is that a compliance protection, or people actually like scanning them to be a more informed consumer, I guess?
Yeah, I'd say probably both. I mean, I know I like to be an informed consumer, but I know many of the regulations are met by saying there's no possible way we can fit this amount of information on a label the size of that goes on the product we have. So they're relying on that QR code to link them to the rest of the information they need to meet the regulation.
Okay. I mean, you work in a lot of different industries. Is it more difficult to work in cannabis than, some of the other industries that you work in when it comes to labeling?
You got an idea, Scott?
No, I think that's a good question. I think the challenge that I've run into mostly is just the knowledge gap of mature manufacturing. It's been around for over 100 years to like, hey, this is what Nick was saying earlier. We have a passion project. We're learning a bunch of stuff. So the education part of it is probably the biggest thing of being like, hey, there is a better way versus, running a mail merge in Word to print all your stuff, right? Like that's where my brain stopped prior to getting into the whole manufacturing and labeling space.
Okay.
So it's the education is I think once that is a thing and catches on, it'll be much easier to talk to people and say, hey, this is where we want to go, and that it's familiar and it's not new ground.
Okay. I forgot to ask you, do you have a personal connection to cannabis at all?
I went to college.
Just the standard answer. I was in college.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's fair enough. Did you guys receive any response from your families when you kind of talked about how you were working in the cannabis space?
Oh, I remember it was during the pandemic, and everybody's trying their best. We're trying to save the world from our basements, and I had to give a webinar on cannabis labeling, and we were talking about one of the solutions we deployed, and I didn't cut my hair for all of COVID. I had hair down to here. I looked
solid.
It looked exactly like I did in college, and I opened up the presentation with, if 15 years ago I would have told myself I'm going to be in my basement talking about weed, I would have really laughed, and it was true, and I looked identical. So I forgot the question.
Oh no, just your family's response. Your family's response. So it's just like, I've actually,
that's why I said it. So during that, I have 3 kids. They'd come in the basement, and initially I would kind of hide my screen share and, try to keep it away from them. But now, I mean, I'd say it's not frowned upon, but it's just another area in which we do business in. We label alcohol, we label cigarettes, and cannabis is just another thing to put a label on. Also something that you're going to need to prepare our kids to be able to do responsibly when the time comes.
Completely agreed. Scott, how about yourself? Did friends and family come out of the woodwork because now you're the cannabis expert?
No, but it is a little more interesting when I talk to people about what I do at parties. Before it was, imagine you started a business making screws. I'd lose people pretty quick. So it's very interesting to talk about. Especially my dad is he is a software developer as well. So he and I will often talk about. I'll say, hey, this is the project I'm working on. It's these APIs going here. So it's a lot of fun to talk about. But I remember I was home for Christmas one year, and in California it was legal, in Wisconsin it is not. Mm-hmm. So I was bringing back some presents for my roommates, and my mom is helping me pack. She's like, I don't think I was supposed to find these. I was like, yeah, thanks, Mom.
Right.
But no frowns or anything from my family. It's more just an interesting new business that we're tackling.
So kind of a elephant, not just in the room, but in the state. You know, we work in Wisconsin. Do you guys live in Wisconsin too?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. You guys keep using these glowing examples of how well they're doing cannabis in Illinois. When are we going to see it in Wisconsin?
That's an interesting point. I don't know.
You're the one who lives in Madison.
I keep banging on doors and I keep asking them. I'm just like, hey, I saw you on up front, but things aren't checking out with just 5 state-run dispensaries. Doesn't sound like the best business plan. Yep. But no, so I've got nothing for you there.
Yeah, I know. It's already decriminalized, right?
In certain areas, but there are still. I still feel like a little dicey when you're in those rural areas, and you just know that you've got maybe someone that's a little bit more of a hardliner.
Yeah.
That's patrolling. So I've been a little bit more mindful of that. I know that in Madison's legal.
Yeah.
Like all we're missing are dispensaries with actual storefronts.
Yeah.
And I guess I've felt the same way in certain parts of Milwaukee. Mm-hmm. But yeah, like I grew up in southeastern Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Right across the border from some of those dispensaries, and those county sheriffs are intense, man.
Yeah.
So if you had to predict it, when would you think, is Wisconsin going to go last?
Oh, I don't know if it'll go last. Right now, we have Minnesota, Illinois, Michigan, kind of, even Canada.
Yeah.
It's legal.
I know.
All 4 sides.
I'd assume at some point pretty soon here we'll get with the program and start collecting the tax dollars, because everybody's just driving over the border to get it at this point.
Oh, it was like, the number was bananas when they came out. Like they tracked like 8 dispensaries that were closest to the Wisconsin border.
Yeah.
And it was something like $30 million just collected from Wisconsin residents in like the first quarter.
Well, and, if you go to Illinois, you can only buy half as much if you have an out-of-state ID.
Yeah.
So, you probably have half of those people getting halfway home and turning around to restock.
I mean, they're pretty liberal with that, where they're just like, legally, I need you to leave the establishment and then come back in. And it's just like, what? They're like, just go to your car for a second, man. I'm like, all right. Yeah, we got to play by the rules.
Yeah.
So what would you say is the future of cannabis labeling? Like, what are some changes that are still coming down the pike that people should be prepared for?
I think the biggest thing that is going to really solidify is a larger governing body, whether that's federal or not, to come in and say, this is how we're going to do it. This is the right stuff. This is the stuff we need on the label. This is how we keep the seed to sale chain intact.
Yeah.
Similar to like automotive or food and bev or pharma, of like, we have a unique identifier and this is the standard across all businesses. Do
you have people in-house? Like, are you on the pulse of what is compliant in each state? Or are you kind of relying on the operators in each state to provide you with the appropriate information?
Yeah. With a lot of reliance, because it's so ever changing, and then all the states are very different themselves. And that is similar into what I, kind of the approach I take with different industries. If I took the time to be an expert on automotive, general manufacturing, pharmaceutical, food and bev, and everything, I wouldn't be able to actually do my job.
Yeah, right.
So it comes with a lot of working with the customer and the operator to say, hey, this is what we need to put on there. They have the what needs to be, and I can really work the how we actually do it within our solution. So that is usually a very productive working.
Okay. Well, it shines a light on the importance of our partners.
Mm-hmm.
I keep leaning on Illinois because it's the easiest to go there and touch and see. But we have a real good partner down there who represents our product, all the hardware, but then will also help you make sure your label is compliant for there.
Mm-hmm.
To couple off your question though about, the future, what do we see coming? I think what we're going to see a lot more of is bigger companies buying the smaller companies.
Mhm.
I know a lot of the rules are written to say, no, we want to keep it small and let it be run by the people.
Yeah.
And historically that just doesn't work. And
Right.
I see that the same way in cannabis, whether it's, you have the license, but you don't have the money or the location. So we'll help you and take, 80% of the profits. But with big companies running things, not small companies, decisions become bigger, the spend becomes bigger, the supply chain becomes more integrated.
Mhm.
And with it comes those manufacturing best practices that deploy bigger scale solutions, trimming the fat, eliminating the fingerprints that I talked about.
Well, and it's difficult when you talk about who has the license, especially when they're trying to do the social equity licenses.
Yeah.
And then you read that, or you find out that like 1% of the people that were issued a license still hold on to it or are actually involved in the business. I don't know. Stuff like that is frustrating, but I will give cannabis credit for at least trying something new. So
yeah, I don't think it's bad, and I think it's a good way to get it kicked off. It's just I don't see it being sustainable in the long term.
yeah. So you keep talking about the partners who are great at what they do. Do you
Yeah.
guys have any like labeling horror stories?
Ooh, in cannabis.
Or, I mean, yeah, let's start with cannabis. And then,
Yeah.
I feel like something just jumped into your mind and I want to know what that was.
I mean, we've seen some pretty ugly scenarios.
Yeah.
I'd say the ugliest labeling horror story always starts with typically somebody named Karen
Okay.
in a labeling room.
It's just such an unfortunate name to
yeah.
have this.
It was
tough one.
Yeah.
it was the first time I saw it. It was literally a woman named Karen who had a room, probably the size of where we're on camera here,
Mhm.
shelves all the way along the back, floor to ceiling,
Mhm.
with different pre-printed rolls of labels in them.
Okay.
And Karen was the only person who could properly label products for this company.
She was like the gatekeeper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we've seen that many, many times. And so we had like Karens in labeling before there were Karens in society. But because
Do you go to her and you're like, you started all of this?
No, we present a better solution, and she is this is why it can't be done,
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And so we've seen that a lot where the big roadblock is really the way it's always been done
Yeah.
by people relying upon tribal knowledge
Yeah.
rather than spending a little bit of money now to make things way better in the long term.
Well, I mean, in terms of like replacing some of that tribal knowledge, you guys seem to have like a more accessible solution to kind of like, let's just say, help augment the tasks of these Karens.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
replace her.
Yeah.
Still very important. Very important. How about yourself? Any cannabis horror stories that you can think of in terms of labeling?
I mean, it's always kind of Nick hit the nail on the head of it starts with, we started small and this is how we did it. And then our business has grown 15-fold, 20-fold. Since then, we're still doing the same process, which is now just scaled up. It comes to a lot of, I think of a manufacturing group who had 12,000 different products and like about 12,000 labels to replace.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of like, okay, how do we now scale back and say maybe we have 15 different labels and we use that dynamic data. To your point, the like automation and things, the integration, they always start small of how do we make this process a little bit better? And then we can build on top of that of like, now we have automatically data coming in, the right data coming in. Now, how do we automate the printing of it? And how do we automate the application of the labels on the boxes? It's always kind of a building thing. And yeah, to your point, just augmenting slightly until all of a sudden we have a really great process.
So what can the Cannabis Equipment News viewers and listeners expect from TechLinks next? What are you guys working on?
Oh, we're working on a lot. So particularly in cannabis, we are our partnerships with Confident Limbs and Metric are strong. And the deployment of it requires a Scott or somebody like Scott to help the consumer put in their API keys to be able to access the data from Metric. We are not yet over that hump where we have enough level of confidence saying they're not going to ask for a data attribute that we haven't heard of. So really formalizing the ease of deployment of our current integrations is the quickest thing I think you'll see from us. New integrations, we kind of took our sweet time on the Confident Limbs and the Metric stuff to be able to say, okay, well, where's BioTrack, Canix, any other solution that you're going to want to access data from, we'll be able to plug and play into ours with relative ease. And then I'd say bigger than that is our enterprise level like web printing tool. Is typically great for companies that, control things in one location, but need to launch labeling in many, most of the time over state lines. And we're not yet to the point where it's necessarily allowed for a company to operate in multiple states. So I think that's kind of the big next play we'll see as more regulations loosen. And if we see federal legalization or at least a more widespread federal decriminalization to let people function over those state lines.
You said it sounds like you guys take a little bit of time to roll out new products. Do you ever have, bugs pop up or unforeseen things pop up, or is everything pretty QC'd and beta tested before you roll it out to your customers?
That question hits home so hard because as the sales guy now,
and enterprise product manager.
Yeah, formerly enterprise product manager. When I was in the product management hat, I would regularly say, do you want it quick or do you want it to work? And now as the sales guy, I'm like, I want it to work and I want it quick. So I'm fully aware that we can't, but I'd say we have an incredibly rigorous quality. We call it our quality assurance handbook. It's not only from the point of like identifying a market requirement and validating that it's worth our while to put the effort in, but then it's actually testing it. And I think to get a little bit in the weeds, we make drivers for somewhere over 3,600 printers that work natively with our product, not generic. So when we launch a feature, we are testing it on every operating system, on every printer. And we've been able to deploy some, testing automation with it. But we also manually do quite a bit of it to make sure we're not delivering a junk product. So to say that we've never had a bug would be a lie, but I think that's true for any software company. It's been very, very long time since we've had like a critical one that's stopped a rollout or caused more than, a minor nuance.
How often are you communicating with some of your customers just that are looking for new features, new products?
It depends. There's a few who we work with more often and more closely to say, hey, they're really hot on a new one, and say, hey, if you want to take a look at the beta, give us some feedback, let us know what you think on it. We have a few of those relationships. A lot of the testing I've done myself and my team, we do all the testing to make sure, one, it works how it should and make sure it's functional, but also it's intuitive and the user experience makes sense too. Because those are kind of two different games that are, it's a hard balance for everyone to kind of be like, all right, well, it works really well, but it's, it's rigid or it's hard to use. So it's finding that balance of functionality and ease of use.
We have a voice of the customer team now. So,
does that mean you both think the other one is it?
It's his name's Sean. He leads the voice of the customer on the label design side. And then Bob, who's our close coworker, is the voice of the customer on the enterprise side. But basically, they're soliciting information from happy and unhappy customers based on situations. We're getting previews of what's to come in front of them. The best enhancements are the ones that came from a customer saying, boy, it sure would be nice if this happened, or why did this simple thing take me so long, or was it so hard? So I think we've been doing the voice of the customer before we formalized it. It was now people have job titles and are getting paid for it. So
What is the onboarding process like?
for a new customer?
Yeah.
Well, so typically people work with one of our partners,
Mm-hmm.
and our partners said, hey, download a trial of CodeSoft, give it a shot. Sometimes the customer gets to our website, via Google AdWords or whatever method, put us on the top of the list for what they're searching. So very often we will have a new customer who has already used the trial of our product and bought it
Yeah.
and needs a little bit of help integrating with Confident Limbs or getting their data from Metric.
Okay.
I'd say the larger a company, the more likely they are to issue like a request for price or proposal to say, hey, I want you to do a lot of homework before we'll even consider you. So we've
Okay.
seen it both ways, but more often than not, a customer becomes a customer because they can self-select our product without maybe a direct engagement or needing to work. And that's why it's so important to us to make these things easier for our customers to deploy moving forward.
Just a general curiosity. You guys, your tagline is barcode better, right?
Yeah.
I mean, will we ever operate in a society that doesn't need a barcode?
Oh,
I don't know, man. I
Well,
might.
So this is a big one for us barcode geeks here. If you look at the technologies that could replace barcodes, you're looking at invisible barcodes
Mm-hmm.
built into the package, right? You
Mhm.
look at your cornflakes, but there's little designs behind Tony the Tiger that can tell you the lot number, when it was manufactured and at what facility,
Okay.
or RFID chips.
Mhm.
RFID chips have gotten significantly cheaper and more easy to program on a wide spread. So I'd say they're both threats,
Mhm.
but I don't anticipate it going away all the way.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, if everything was like had an RFID chip in it, I mean, you just put all your groceries on the belt and then it would just know what you owe, right?
That's
That's the idea.
Yeah, the sexiest RFID applications are in like retail.
Yeah.
It's like we used to staff people overnight to do inventory. Now it's live.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So
No,
Yeah.
I'm generally interested. I mean,
oh no, it's an interesting topic. I used to tell people, RFID's been an emerging technology for 20 years that's coming for our jobs. And part of me is still like, yeah, it's growing. I mean, Walmart is mandating certain product lines get delivered to them with RFID tags.
Oh, really?
And we're seeing we're seeing a lot of growth in popularity of people saying, I'm not going to order pre-encoded RFID tags because then you don't design anything or encode anything. You get it and you apply it, to saying, no, I need to program them in-house on demand, have them be serialized.
Mhm.
So we've certainly seen growth in that, but a majority of those RFID tags have a label that's printed with a barcode as well, because you still need to boop it at checkout.
So, I mean, is that possible in cannabis just because, Metric has their own RFID tags? Is that something that we could see in cannabis?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the Metric RFID tags are popular because they're tagging the plants.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, can you imagine have you seen a grow facility?
Yeah.
Like going to 800 5-gallon pails? And that's just not realistic. So
Yeah.
being able to wand something that might be hidden. I don't know if I see too much access to it outside of the grow room at this point. But I'll be the first to admit that I'm definitely wrong on occasion.
Very good. Well, I really appreciate you guys coming in. It's always great to have someone in the studio. It's just a different conversation, But I mean, before we get out of here, anything else that I'll start with you, Scott? Anything else that you want to tell us about yourself, or we might have left out about TechLinks in regards to stuff the CEN audience should know?
I think the biggest thing for us, and especially our team and how we approach it, is we're hands-on with the customer. If you have specific needs or anything like, can we be doing this better, or can you help us with this? We're ready to jump at that and tackle it with you. It's a ton of fun to, one, just problem solve in general, but learn more about industries and more about requirements and different processes and developing those best practices.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think about me, just Nothing you already don't know.
Well, do you like, you know, a lot of times once you're in cannabis, it kind of gets its hooks into you, right? Like, do you like working, you know, pretty exclusively in the cannabis industry, or, you know, do you see the allure of something from like food and bev?
You know, it's been a lot of fun for me. This was my first MJ BizCon this year.
Oh,
and
okay.
a lot of trade shows I've been to in the past have been very much formal, very, you know, kind of we're here to talk business and not usually in my age group. But then
Yeah.
BizCon was very like, oh, I have a bit of a kinship with these people, you know? It's just,
Yeah. No, I completely agree. You know, so up until last week, I was out in Anaheim at the trade show, and it is the first one I went to since MJ Biz. And it's just like, oh yeah, that's how it is everywhere else. I mean, it's still really fun, but I mean, it's a different vibe.
it's a different, yeah, it's a different industry, and it's weird to feel like I'm working with, and customers are like kind of my peers. It's a different feeling, which I enjoy.
Nick, how about yourself?
You know, so we obviously work in many, many industries.
Yeah.
I'd say one thing that I really, really like is being able to take problems we've solved elsewhere
Mm-hmm.
to the cannabis industry.
Mhm.
That's always like a satisfying feeling.
Yeah.
And you know, Scott said the O factor, like blowing people's minds when it's like, well, I've done this every day. It's just mind blowing to you, not to anybody in food and bev.
But
or,
it doesn't get old.
Yeah, pharmaceutical, life sciences space. No, I can't think of anything particular left out about me personally. I'd say just to piggyback on Scott's comments, you know, one of the things we pride ourselves on at TechLinks is that direct engagement with the customer.
Mm-hmm.
Our partners are certainly important, as, like I said, our solution doesn't stand alone. You need media, printers, business systems. But where I think we really differentiate ourselves is that we will get in the weeds. Another pun for you.
Oh man, just
and-
perfectly
yeah.
bookended.
And dig into the specific situation. I'd say, you know, Scott and a lot of the other engineers have like an insatiable hunger for solving a problem.
Mhm.
So it's been interesting to see in occasion us care more about making one thing a little better than even the end user on occasion. We're like, it's good enough. And we're like, no, you're not hanging up yet. Like,
Yeah.
Oh, that's just,
Yeah.
I mean, that's just the stereotypical engineer right there.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
like, no, it can't. It's not ready yet.
Yeah.
It's never ready. Well, Nick and Scott, thanks again for coming, guys. I really do appreciate it. And I hope we get a chance to do it again soon.
Yeah, it'd be great. Thanks very much, man.
All right. Well, before we get out of here, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You could also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach me at david@cannabisequipmentnews.com with email the podcast in the subject line. You can also subscribe to our daily newsletter and make sure you get it delivered to your inbox first. You know what? Actually, Nick, one thing I forgot to say,
What do you got?
even though it's after the close, where should people go for like more information if cannabis operators are looking to get started or they're kind of in their fact-finding mission? Where should they go?
Yeah. Obviously, our website, techlinks.com, we have a whole page dedicated to cannabis. You can fill out a form. We'll get back to you. Give us just a brief description of your needs.
Nick, how do you spell TechLinks?
TEKLYNX.
Oh, there we go.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. So TEKLYNX.com. The website content is good. The form. You can also, I don't know.
Blog, Human Readable.
Yeah, we have blogs with good content. So
Yeah. Is there another company out there that is spelled TechLinks just like traditionally spelled tech and links?
yeah, they're like an IT services company.
So make sure you got that spelling right.
Yes.
All right. Well, thanks again, you guys. You already heard the close. You know where to find us and you know how to contact me. For Nick Recht and Scott Fabian with TechLinks, I'm David Manti. This is the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast. We'll see you next week.